Hi there, my name is Hannah Phillips and welcome to the 7th episode of Under the Brolly Season 2. This podcast aims to educate and inform the wider community about the lesser known sexualities, gender identities and expressions, kinks and fetishes, collectively known as LGBT+. MyUmbrella LGBT+ is a volunteer-led project of Reading Pride launched in 2015 to raise awareness of these identities. MyUmbrella can be reached in a number of ways such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or via our contact form on our website. Details are on the screen below. In this episode, we're talking about Bisexual Awareness Week and Sexual Health Awareness Week with two special guests. We have Darlaine Honey, a sexual health specialist working at Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust. Darlaine, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Darlaine and I am a sexual health advisor for the Garden Clinic in Slough. My job involves all sorts of things from giving people results to actually working around results, counselling people with their results, and just generally doing anything that needs doing really. We're all pretty universal. I give people all their results and discuss them with them, look for solutions if they're having problems. We deal with rape, domestic violence. We also are very active in PrEP and have a PrEP clinic, and we also give out PEP for those emergency times when you need it. I love my job, absolutely love my job, and I can't wait to go to work every morning because every day is different. No 2 days are the same. And it just brings me a lot of joy to be able to give some input into people when they need some help. So we do any kind of infection there and none of us are judgmental. So come down and see us.
Thank you, Darlaine. We are also joined with Philip Baldwin, a human rights activist best known for his campaigning around LGBT+ issues, HIV, homelessness, asylum, and faith inclusion. Philip, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I'm a magazine columnist and write for publications including Gay Times. I host a radio show for Soho Radio. I'm a trustee of a faith organisation called the E07 Foundation, and we work to confront issues surrounding sexuality and gender across all faiths, but particularly within the Church of England. And I'm also a Stonewall role model, which involves going into schools to discuss my own coming out experiences and faith. I'm gay, HIV positive and Christian.
Thank you, Philip. Our first topic of the show is Bisexual Awareness Week, also known as #BiWeek, is an annual celebration week held between the 16th and the 23rd of September. It is an extension of Bisexuality Day, held annually on the 23rd of September. The day promotes cultural acceptance of the bisexual community as well as attempts to create a platform for advocating up bisexual rights and debunking common myths or assumptions. So, what is bisexuality? Bisexuality is a romantic attraction, sexual attraction, or sexual behavior towards both males and females or to more than one gender. It may also be defined as romantic or sexual attraction to people of any sex or gender identity, which is known as pansexuality. It has also become an umbrella term for a number of other identities, which fall outside of the homo-heterosexual binary, such as homoflexible or heteroflexible. The bisexual pride flag was designed by Michael Page in 1998, the year before I was born, to give the bisexual community a symbol comparable to the gay pride flag of the larger LGBTQ+ community. Page aimed to increase the visibility of bisexual both among society and as a whole within the LGBTQ+ community. The first bisexual pride flag was unveiled at the Bi Cafe's first anniversary party on the 5th of December 1998. From top to bottom, the pink colour represents sexual attraction to the same sex only, i.e. gay and lesbian. The blue colour represents sexual attraction to the opposite sex, only, i.e. straight. And the resultant overlap colour purple represents sexual attraction to both sexes, i.e. bi. In 1998, Page stated that the bisexual pride flag was free for public and commercial use, and that it was not patented, trademarked, or service marked. In April 2020, Binet USA falsely claimed that the sole copyright owner of the flag and flag colours. It said organizations and individuals who wish to use the flag for commercial purposes would be required to obtain a license despite having nothing to do with the flag's design or creation. On the 29th of April 2020, Binet USA continued to defend their unbased claim and ultimately ceased to use the flag on the 8th of May, opting to instead using a different design. Philip, please tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Speaking as a gay man, I think it's really important that all LGBTQ plus people are treated with dignity and respect. I have a number of friends who are bi, and they still, even in 2021, tell me that they often do encounter discrimination and prejudice, and that is both within the straight community and also from LGBTQ plus people. I've heard from them that they are sometimes described as being greedy or indecisive. If they're a bi man, they are sometimes categorized as being on a journey towards being a gay man. If they're a bi woman, they're sometimes misrepresented as being on a journey towards being a lesbian. There are lots of challenges which bi people do still face. From interviews that I've done with bi people, my understanding is that there is increasing visibility and awareness, but that significant challenges do still remain. So I would circle back to what I had to my initial comment, in that I think we need to treat everyone within the LGBTQ plus community with dignity and respect. We need to listen to bi people and hear what they have to say and find out about their experiences. I have one bi friend who has recently married a woman, and they're having a baby. Something that he has described is that he almost feels that he doesn't necessarily fit in with the LGBTQ plus community, that he has received a backlash from some of his LGBTQ plus friends because they perceive him as no longer being part of the LGBTQ plus community. So I think it's important that we reinforce the importance of being inclusive and remember that every LGBTQ plus person is unique.
Thank you, Philip. Darlaine, do you have anything to add or ask Philip?
The aim of any sexual health or reproductive clinic is to actually treat everybody the same. We're not judgmental, or we don't really mind. Our main aim is just to help anybody get what they need, whether it was from Pair Pop Rep or any other things that you need to help your sexual wellness. That's just our aim, is to actually treat everybody the same. There's no judgment.
Thank you, Darlaine and Philip. Now we move on to Sexual Health Week. The Children and Social Work Act 2017 set out the requirements for the teaching of relationship and sex education in schools, for which the government created the plan for this to be compulsory from 2019 with an extension time to September 2020, should schools need it. The new legislation makes relationships and sex education compulsory for all schools, including primary, independent schools, academies, maintained and free schools. The new legislation also includes special schools. This year, Sexual Health Weeks runs from the 13th to the 19th of September, with this year's theme, Consent. Do you get it? And it is being led at a national level by Brook. Darlaine, what kind of things do you get asked at the clinic?
About consent, we get asked about whether it was somebody's fault that something happened to them, which is a little bit sad. I think it can be turned around to the fact that we ask more about what happened and why they think something was consensual. There seems to be a bit of a blurring between what people understand as consent and what people feel they ought to be doing, either because they feel they couldn't speak up or something similar. So we quite often will ask if an event comes to us that, wasn't quite mutual consent. We will ask and talk about boundaries, how to set them and stuff like that. So if people don't feel like there's been mutual consent, we can actually help people understand it a little bit further. I'm not quite sure what they're being shown or being taught in schools. So sometimes we kind of elaborate on that for them.
How does lack of consent present in clinic?
It will present with sometimes an STI, or sometimes somebody coming in because they have a problem, like a discharge or something that they're troubled with, some soreness, some spots or a rash or something. And then we go through, which is required by law to talk to young people. We go through a certain set of questions, and they might say then they didn't feel comfortable with the sex that they had, and they didn't feel it was consensual. So some people come in like that, and some people come in where they've been sexually assaulted or raped, which is definitely not consensual, and they've been spiked in their drink, or they have been sort of given too many drinks with the thought process that that's what would get the perpetrator to be able to have sex with the person because they were drunk, and then the person that actually is presenting with the problem feels kind of like it was their fault because they were drunk, or they wore a tight vest, or they wore a tight skirt or something like that. So those are the kind of things that we deal with, people not actually completely understanding that it's not your fault. Consent is consent, and if you say no, it means no.
And are young people understanding the complete content of consent?
In my experience in the clinic, I don't think they are fully. I would guide people to the Consent and Cup of Tea, which is a nice little video that you can find on YouTube about consent. Consent is about mutual agreement, and it's about you can say no, and you can pull out, and you can stop at any one time, because you might have said yes yesterday or the day before, but today you're going to say no. And people need to kind of respect that. So I don't think young people do, because they quite often talk to me about they were wearing something, or they said something, or they had too much to drink. And so we kind of do a lot of work reassuring people and telling them that, if you said no, it actually means no. And, helping people to understand how people go about coercing other people into having sex, either with alcohol or maybe slipping something in their drink, and what to watch for and how to be careful about these things, so that they could understand what's happening when they're out.
How does alcohol and school plays a part in other people's awareness of consent?
Alcohol across the board takes part because it lowers your inhibitions, and therefore you might get a bit loud, a bit leery, or you might just completely collapse in a heap on the floor and be unconscious. That doesn't give anyone the right to come over and start having sex with you because you're unconscious, because you're not consenting if you're unconscious. No way. And if you're loud and leery and you're showing off in front of your friends or something, and go, oh yeah, blah blah blah, and then afterwards somebody gets you on your own and you're saying no, and they're saying, oh well, you were up for it a moment ago, but actually no, I'm not. But I'm allowed to do these things without having anybody thinking at that time that I'm up for it, because I'm saying no.
How do you know when someone consents?
You can know by being given permission. You can check with that person that they're still okay with that, if they're enthusiastic with you, if they're kissing you back, if they're not trying to squirm away from you, if they're not unconscious, if they're not drunk, if they're not drugged. All those things contribute. You've got to take charge of yourself. You can't take advantage of people because of this. This happens. Surely consensual sex has got to be nicer than just taking advantage of people, because these things affect people for a long time. It doesn't just affect them for that night, just because you've had your fun. The next day and the day after and the weeks after and the months after, people feel violated, assaulted, and like that it was their fault, which actually goes down a different path for a lot of people, and it's just kind of not fair, really.
Thank you, Darlaine. Philip, do you have anything to add?
I think Darlene's made some really important points there. Having consent as this year's theme for Sexual Health Week is great, particularly following the Everyone's Invited conversation that took place earlier this year. Consent is something that needs to be taught in schools. It needs to be taught in a sex-positive way, which is empowering for people and enables people to discuss sex without any sense of shame. From an LGBTQ plus perspective, I think that we need to be careful when these issues are discussed in schools, that it isn't only from a heteronormative vaginal intercourse perspective. I think we need to move beyond that now and look at sex and consent from an LGBTQ plus perspective as well. Another interesting point is that in terms of consent and image sharing, this is often perceived as impacting only women. However, a study from 2018-2019 showed that 28% of individuals aged between 18 and 34 who were complaining about receiving unsolicited images over the internet were actually men. So I think we probably need more research into that, how that's impacting not just women, but LGBTQ plus people as well. A further issue in terms of Sexual Health Week, and perhaps Darlaine has some insights into this as well, is that all our information at the moment is based on 2019 data. So the data that was released at the end of 2020, the national data, that reflected statistics which were gathered during 2019. So at the moment, we're not entirely sure what happened during the pandemic in terms of STIs and blood-borne virus. Hopefully, during the coronavirus pandemic, we're going to see a drop in some STIs and in the transmission of blood-borne viruses. However, at the moment, we don't have the data. If we look at the data from 2019, there was an explosion in terms of syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, and the four groups which were most impacted by this were young people, people living with HIV, people of colour, and gay and bi men. So there's a lot there to think about in terms of Sexual Health Week. Consent is really important, but Sexual Health Week is also an opportunity to think about STIs and sexual health in general.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that because we don't have the data yet. And there was quite an increase in syphilis, but also we had a lot of funding cuts from sexual health. So there was a lot less testing going on from some things because we've had our budgets cut. So it does impact the whole of the chain right the way down and the clinic floor, sadly. But hopefully the data will come out there. From the NSPCC, they did a survey in schools that found quite a few people were approached online. There's been a lot of grooming happening, and 40% of under 18s had been depressed or suffering mental health problems, domestic violence, and it just all accumulated because they were in close proximity with people, sexual abuse as well, which is unfortunate. So there really needs to be the data collected so that we can actually move forward with this and put a bit more funding into sexual health so that we can actually deal with this on a larger scale, because sex won't go away. People are always going to have sex, and it just isn't going to impact by decreasing funding and things like that.
Those are incredibly valid points, and I think if we don't have the funding there for sexual health services, including testing, then we're not going to be able to tackle STIs and bloodborne viruses effectively. There was a large push during the coronavirus pandemic to get people testing for HIV and other STIs from home. So you can now order HIV testing kits for syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia from a number of different sexual health charities and organisations. And I would really encourage everyone to get testing, whether that's ordering a testing kit at home or going to a traditional sexual health clinic and having a sexual health test or full screen in person, because most sexual health clinics are now functioning normally again.
Yeah, we're functioning normally again, and it's actually great to see people in the clinic because that's where we like to see them. But it's also a place where you can often pick up on other things and offer other bits of help that people might not have thought about. You can signpost people to other places, and quite often it's in that last 2 minutes that you're seeing somebody where they will actually maybe disclose something that isn't right, and you can offer help with. So a face-to-face meeting with somebody is much better really in the long run, because you can actually get a rapport with somebody while they're sitting there and in front of you, and when they feel like they can trust you enough to disclose something that is personal or bothersome or worrying, then at least we can start to help that person find a solution, or at least look forward towards finding a solution for anything that comes up.
Again, I would agree there with Darlaine. An issue that I have campaigned about frequently in the past and continue to do so now is intimate partner violence and the challenges faced by women living with HIV. Women living with HIV are disproportionately impacted by intimate partner violence, and it's often only in those face-to-face meetings, which Darlaine has just referred to, that women feel able to confide in a healthcare professional about the challenges that they have been facing. So I think getting people back into the clinics, into those face-to-face meetings, is something really important.
Face-to-face, I think, works a lot better than digital as well for situations like that, because some people are being coerced as well. Some people are even having to record the consultation by somebody outside that's coercing or controlling. So it's really good that people can come into the clinic, because a healthcare worker will pick up on these things and maybe be able to offer some help or advice, at least to be able to give them a number where they feel that they can help and get to safety should they need it. And if you're if you're on a digital camera or you're doing a video consult, you're missing the small non-verbal cues that may come up when you're sitting face to face.
I think that's exactly right. And if you'd like to join in the conversation surrounding Sexual Health Week on social media, the hashtag is SHW21.
In July 2016, a group of advocates, activists, and scientists teamed up together to proclaim once and for all that people living with HIV with undetectable viral loads cannot sexually transmit HIV. Together, they coined the phrase undetectable equals untransmittable, or you equal you. This means it is more important than ever to break the stigma of HIV, especially for those who lived through the 1980s, best described in the TV show It's a Sin. Philip, please tell us more about it.
I might start firstly by talking about It's a Sin, which was really a groundbreaking show. We had an incredibly compelling storyline, great actors cast in the roles, and also a fantastic soundtrack. I really liked seeing LGBTQ plus actors playing LGBTQ roles on our TV screens. I think that's, as an aside, something which is really important. What It's a Sin highlighted is the challenges that people living with HIV/AIDS faced during the 1980s and until the introduction of antiretroviral treatments in 1996. So the first case of HIV was diagnosed in the UK in 1981, and it's around 1981 that the show It's a Sin really starts. I was really impressed by the amount of research which Russell T Davies put into It's a Sin, and I know that there were a team of people contributing to that research, people who had lived through the AIDS crisis, people who had seen their friends die, people who were diagnosed during that period and had survived. It was actually very educational. So, for example, in It's a Sin, they refer to HIV being portrayed as a US or American disease. And I think many of us were probably aware that that was how HIV/AIDS had been portrayed in the UK in the early 1980s. However, they highlight that Americans actually living in London in the early 1980s would sometimes say that they were Canadian because the stigma and ignorance around HIV was so great. And at the time, so little was known around HIV/AIDS that sexual health charities were even telling gay and bi men to avoid sleeping with Americans or having sexual intercourse with Americans. So I thought details like that were very cleverly incorporated into It's a Sin. Second reason why I think It's a Sin was done in a particularly educational way is that it emphasized that in terms of HIV activism, it wasn't just all coming from the USA. A lot of us have heard about Larry Kramer and the amazing work being done by ACT UP in the USA. However, these organizations also had their counterparts in the UK. Some of us have maybe heard of the campaigner Mark Ashton. He died of HIV/AIDS during the 1980s and is commemorated in the AIDS quilt. Another individual who is very modest about his contribution to campaigning around HIV/AIDS in the UK is Peter Tatchell and the group Outrage. They were very vocal during the 80s and 90s, applying pressure on the government for better access to treatments and fighting the stigma at the time surrounding HIV/AIDS. So I thought It's a Sin was great at an aesthetic level. It was it was really amazing to watch, although it left me in tears. But it was also educational in that it gave people like myself who were born in the 1980s, it gave us an insight into what it was like for people who were living with HIV and dying of AIDS in the 1980s. So it was also educational.
I had friends, I grew up in that era, and I had friends who were affected by the stigma attached to it in the 1980s, and it was horrible. It really was horrible. I'm still shocked that the stigma is still around there about HIV as well. We need to get the U=U message out there a lot more. I'd like to see a lot more campaigns, a lot more posters up or billboards or whatever, just so that people can understand. I do a lot of explaining this in the sexual health clinic to people that you know, I come across who want to know this kind of thing. And it really does need to be a bit of a louder message, I think.
In terms of my own HIV diagnosis, I was diagnosed with HIV in January 2010 when I was 24 years old over my lunch break from work. Darlene's just touched on the continuing stigma of HIV, and it actually took me about 3 years really to come to terms with my HIV diagnosis. Following my HIV diagnosis in 2010, I experienced fear, anger, shame, denial, even grief. During that first year, there were even times when I contemplated taking my own life. Since 2010, there have been a number of important medical advances. Around 2014, 2015, we started to hear about pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, which is a pill which can be taken daily or on demand by an HIV-negative person. And that is highly effective, close to 100% effective at preventing the transmission of HIV. It was the following year that we started to hear more about the very important undetectable equals untransmittable, U=U messaging. A lot of HIV positive people really talk about U=U as smashing the viral closet. This is something that has liberated them and has been incredibly empowering for them. As an HIV positive person myself, it's very reassuring to know that because my viral load is undetectable, meaning that I can't pass HIV on, it's reassuring to know that I can't pass HIV on to my sexual partners or to a boyfriend, because that was something that was a real cause of anxiety and fear for many HIV positive people before U=U. So U=U has a dual purpose. It's about informing the general population, HIV negative people, that HIV positive people are that we are healthy, that we can live long and normal lifespans, but it's also about giving people who are HIV positive greater confidence to live their lives.
Yeah, in the clinic, it's great that we see people who are undetectable. They're living happily, healthily, and doing absolutely everything that anybody would expect to do with life. It's just doesn't seem the message is out there too much in the general population that this is achievable and doable, and that's what happens. It's nothing to particularly worry about now. You need to take your pill every day, and that's kind of it, really. You go on, you get checked, you get measured for your bloods and things like that, and it's really containable, and nobody would expect any different. But we need to get the message out there a little bit more to the general population so the stigma can decrease.
I'd say that we have seen incredible medical advances surrounding HIV, but in terms of the stigma of HIV, that still remains. There was a study conducted by the Stigma Index, it's several years ago now, but it showed that 1 in 5 people living with HIV had contemplated taking their own life within the last year, and almost a half of people living with HIV had felt feelings of shame or grief surrounding their HIV. So we need to continue fighting the stigma of HIV, and a key tool in that is the U=U, detectable equals untransmittable messaging.
Thank you, Philip. Which means it's a goodbye from myself, Hannah Phillips, and our guests, Darlaine Honey and Phillips Baldwin. Bye!
You may think it's all a game, but I'm just as much to blame. 'Cause you make me go insane, the colors blue.